And because I'm old,
Well, I had it last month, and I'm sorry.
yeah,
Or
it was.
sorry. Or ready.
Thank you very much.
I missed it last time.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I want you to know before I officially open the meeting, you are in Apex, North Carolina, the peak of voting. And we'll talk more about that later. I will now call the meeting to order for Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024. And we'll transition right into the invocation. If you would, please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. All right, thank you so much. If you're able and willing, please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, welcome, and we'll go ahead now and move into the consent agenda. All consent agenda items are considered routine to be enacted by one motion with the adoption of the consent agenda and without discussion. If a council member requests discussion of an item, the item may be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. One of the things I would like to do tonight is pull consent item number 12, just to get some clarity on some of the points in the policy. And that is the only one I have. Is there any other?
So that's going to be new business one?
Yeah, that'd be moved to new business one, correct. Okay. Any others? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Motion to approve with that change.
All right.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Motion carries unanimously. All right, we'll move now to presentations. Tonight we have American Indian Heritage Month 2024. It's an honor to have you in the chambers tonight. So as usual, we'll read the proclamation for you in unity. So colleagues, if you would join me up front. Again, this is a proclamation for American Indian Heritage Month 2024, and leading us off in the proclamation tonight is Councilwoman Killingsworth.
Whereas American Indian Heritage Month is a time to honor the significant contributions of American Indian nations to our history, art, sciences, economy, and culture, as well as to reflect on the struggles Indigenous peoples have faced and continue to face in their pursuit of sovereignty, justice, and equity. And
Whereas for thousands of years, American Indian nations and communities have stewarded the land now known as the United States, developing vibrant cultures, spiritual traditions, and governing systems that have deeply influenced the values and systems of modern society. And
Whereas North Carolina is home to 8 state-recognized tribes, including the Coharie, Eastern Band of the Cherokee, Hallawasaponi, Lumbee, Meherrin, Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation, and Saponi, and the Waccamaw, Siouan, and
Whereas North Carolina is also home to 4 urban Indian organizations that hold memberships with the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs, including the Cumberland County Association for Indian Peoples, Guilford Native American Association, Metrolina Native American Association, and the Triangle Native American Society. And
whereas the town of Apex acknowledges its existence on the land of the native peoples here long before us and express our appreciation for the American Indian community in Apex.
Now, therefore, I, Jacques K. Gilbert, Mayor of Apex, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim the month of November 2024, American Indian Heritage Month in the town of Apex, and urge all residents to observe this month with reverence for the history of our land and participate in appropriate ceremonies, activities, and educational opportunities. And Rosanna Lindorfer, if you would please come up and accept the proclamation. All right.
I truly want to thank the people, the city council, the mayor for being the first that I know of that has recognized our people and our land. And every time I get a chance to speak, our ancestors are healed. They no longer are here in the earth realm, but as long as I have a voice, I'm going to speak for them because I am the voice of the past. I am the voice of the present. I am their voice for the future. And we are truly silent no more. Thank you so much.
All right, we'll move now to set a regular meeting agenda. Are there any recommended changes before we approve? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve with the change of new business one.
Motion is Ziggerman.
Second.
Second, Gant. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. We'll move now to a public forum. This is opportunity for the community to address town council. Please adhere to the public participation policy. And remember the series of lights in front of you. Green means go, yellow, you have 30 seconds, and then red, start wrapping up your presentation. So we'll go ahead and open it up tonight. First speaker, and also give your name and address for the record. TJ Evans.
All right, TJ Evans, 1001 Diamond Dove Lane. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As a leader of the Juneteenth Committee, I now have sent 2 emails to the Council since our event became town-sponsored in 2022, raising concerns about the event planning process and the upcoming special event policy. So far, I've received responses from the Mayor, who has been instrumental in the event's success each year, and from Audra. As a committee, we'd hope for a collective response showing empathy for our concerns, curiosity to learn more, commitment to accountability, and gratitude for our partnership. The lack of response and accountability has compounded our negative experience, pushing us to becoming a community-led event, as it seems the town prioritizes control over holding staff accountable while ensuring transparency, communication, and community engagement. For the past 3 years, we've dedicated 6 months annually to planning Juneteenth, working with Apex's underserved Black community to amplify their voices and celebrate their rich history in this town. After building this festival from the ground up, we intentionally partnered with the town so the community could see that the town's endorsement was part of an effort to highlight and honor their history. Despite all the hard work that ultimately benefits the town, the council and town leadership have ignored some of the issues we've raised while making the feedback process disheartening. As a committee, we feel that we've been treated more like community servants than true partners. We've provided essential feedback on the special event policy that lacked meaningful community input. Unfortunately, our feedback that is embedded in much of this upcoming policy has been altered in a way that gives the town full control while excluding us from the process. Town staff and leadership have said that the community-led event format benefits us more due to the control it gives us, but we were simply asking for a collaborative partnership, not all the power. My frustration goes beyond the Juneteenth planning process. There's a broader issue of inadequate accountability, communication, and community engagement across all town matters. The internal culture of the town is concerning, and unfortunately, our community is bearing the consequences. Many town staff don't live in Apex, leading to disconnection from the impact of their decisions. This is why, as elected officials, it's crucial that you prioritize community engagement in your governance. Community engagement should always be a top priority for town council and staff, yet we've repeatedly seen that it's not. Whether it's with our committee's feedback on special events, the Chatham at Salem always stop, the impact of the Pleasant Park build on neighbors, the eminent domain acquisitions of the Mills and Lund properties, or the recent cybersecurity attack recovery plan, just to name a few. As a council, community engagement goes beyond setting up a booth at cultural events. It should be your mission to ensure the town's decisions truly reflect the voices of this community. Council, when voting on matters or working with town staff on policies, the focus should be on engaging those directly impacted to find solutions rather than dismissing valid concerns. A common rebuttal is often, local government moves slow, which can come across as an excuse when we see things move quickly when it's at the benefit of an agenda. The community wants clear communication with tangible results. True leadership involves leading with transparency, actively engaging with residents, integrating their feedback into policies, and holding staff accountable. I also urge the implementation of a comprehensive community engagement plan that extends beyond surveys, social media, and cultural research groups. I want to be clear that this is not a personal attack on any of you. My heart truly is to provide feedback that can be beneficial in the efforts to foster true community engagement within our community. A system without accountability will revoke its ability to grow. As someone who deeply loves this town, I hope to see the council shift their focus to these concerns. The APEX community deserves better. Thank you.
Jocelyn,
Sure. It's Jake's, unlike your last name.
I see that. Yeah.
So my name's Jocelyn Jakes. I live at 202 Tobacco Farm Drive. Tobacco Farm Drive has come up a bunch lately because of Parkside townhouses. Everybody within this very large blue range received this in their mail on Friday. I'm the feelings person, so I'm the person who went up and down the block and talked to everybody, and the 3 responses I got were, we give up because this has been going on a while, or it's gonna go in anyway and they're just gonna be looking in our houses and it just doesn't matter. And my most concerning one, I bought this house and no one told me there was going to be a development behind it. That's not okay. We're starting again, is my understanding. So we have another neighborhood meeting with the peoples, the developer, and then we have another planning meeting, and then we'll be back here. But that's going to be a while. And I don't want you to forget that the vote last time was 3-2. My husband has more because he's the engineer, so he has the non-feeling part. I don't know if you want my time. I'm quick and.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Rob Jakes. I live at 202 Tobacco Farm Drive. I'd like to thank Councilmember Zegerman and Mahaffey for coming to visit us. We are talking about a place that is, you hear the term not in my backyard. This is literally in my backyard. The development will be closer than those doors will be when they're built. They're going to be 3-story townhouses directly behind my house, which means people will be looking into my backyard and potentially into our bedrooms. Not something we're interested in. Our main concerns really are, it's my understanding the developer has not made any commitments to prevent flooding of our houses. The rain, that we just had in North Carolina here should be of a concern to anybody. We do get a regular river through our backyard when the rains hit. Everything in the horse farm flows directly through our backyard and out to the Beaver Creek down the hill. We're hoping that the developer would make some commitment to meet flooding concerns. It's also my understanding that on August the 27th, when my wife attended a council meeting here, it was a 3-hour meeting during which several developments were discussed, all of which involved some concessions by the developers, with the exception of one, and that was ours. All of the others were voted on unanimously and approved, whereas my wife mentioned the vote went 3-2 for this one in particular because the developer refused to make any concessions, including privacy fences or any other concessions. I'm not anti-development. I worked in the oil and gas industry for 25 years, including the oil sands of northern Alberta. So development is not a thing that bothers me, but I am a little bit concerned about flooding. I'm a little bit concerned about privacy, and we're also concerned about traffic. My understanding is the traffic study was done in June, not during the time when it's dark. We have a lot of kids that my wife and I see regularly on our way home from the gym waiting for school buses, and I don't believe the traffic study took that into account at all. So thank you very much for your time. I guess I yield my time to anybody else who wants to use it.
Thank you for speaking tonight. Don Cozzolino.
Dawn Casalino, 3632 Bosco Road. Good evening. Last time I promised I would do more than just the old US 1, so this is the New Helen Friendship Community. I talk about this often and many times because we're a rural community, and I had provided information on all the accidents that occurred before. Now I've mapped up just one road up, okay, and thank goodness there's no fatalities, okay, in the last 5 years. However, very distressful amount of crashes. 83 over the past 5 years, 159 vehicles involved in 551 estimated property damages. You know that's low. That's a low number. It's not lifelong. It's not injuries. And what's most concerning is it's only 2.5 miles. So, you know, you combine that with Old One, and you're talking about 5 miles of roads. So we're up to $1.2 million in lowballed estimated property damages, 143 accidents, 263 vehicles involved. Okay, we can do a lot better, okay? We can. And what I've been asking for is a traffic study, right? I've been coming up here and asking, and I appreciate the comments as well. This is very important in decision-making for your development approvals, the new ones, the existing, the in process. We're talking about, in our area, Oliver just got approved last time, and that was not even a full vote. And then we were talking about Peak Landing. So I've been asking and asking and asking for this traffic data, and I finally decided, let me just go on DOT's website. Guess what? They have stations all over North Carolina that pinpoint this data, and they pinpoint it and monitor it by their station's location. We actually happen to have one on Old US 1. We also happen to have it all around on New Holman Road, Olive Chapel, Chapel Ridge, Kelly Road. You go on and on and on. NC 55, 54,000 volume. This is annual average daily traffic, okay? So this is 2023 data. Okay, so just, I remember a number being 3,000 as being kind of like a touch point trigger. So Bosco Road's monitor is 4,500. Olive Chapel's monitor is 3,200. And then you got inflow roads. You got Richardson, 5,700. This is annual average daily traffic. You've got Olive Chapel from coming off of 64, 8,300. Kelly Road, 19,000. Okay, and we've got Chapel Ridge, which I know anybody driving on Chapel Ridge, seeing the sea of cars, 9,900. Okay, and that's just one side, the other side of Olive Chapel. And then Apex Barbecue, 4,900. I mean, you know, the ramps between exit 89 and 93, 39,500. The ramps on US 1 between 540 and 95 and 55, NC 55, 40,000. This is real data. There is real monitoring stations. This is on 2 portals on the NCDOT site. We could do better. We want to do Vision Zero, but you've got to look at the data. You have to use the data. You can't ignore it because it tells the story you don't want to see. And you're creating accidents. So every time I look at the town council portal and I see your smiling faces on there and I see another accident, I'm going to think of you. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking, Ms. Casalino. Alexis Kennedy.
Good evening, City Council members. Today I want to talk to you about 2 little boys and some rocks. Both these little boys live in the same region. They both are 12 years old, both have loving parents. And we both know, They both have loving parents. Now, as we know, children are mischievous and test boundaries. So each little boy, with no parent watching, decides to throw some rocks. Each boy is caught by authorities in the act. The first little boy has his parents called. His parents come to collect him. They're given a ticket and must report to juvenile court where their parents are present. And the child is never taken out of the parents' custody. The little boy and his parents are given a fine, and that's the end of it. Now let's go to the other little boy, who has also been caught. But this little boy is arrested, zippy-tied, blindfolded, and thrown into a vehicle. He is taken out of the region in another country without his parents and interrogated without a parent present. He is told to sign a form in a language he doesn't speak. And then the little boy is taken to court. But it's just not any court. This is military court, where his parents are still not present, and his crime punishable for up to 20 years in military prison. The only difference between these little boys is the first boy is an Israeli settler living in the West Bank, and the other is a Palestinian boy living in the West Bank, where there is a 99% conviction rate for non-Israeli residents and 1.9% conviction rate for Israeli settlers. In the West Bank, there is an apartheid for people living in the same region, one of whom is living illegally, which is the Israeli, and the other is living on his own land in the region of the West Bank. Yet the one living legally on their own land is subjected to dangerous apartheid laws. It's estimated that 500 to 700 children aged between 12 and 17 are held by Israeli detentions each year, according to Save the Children. Human Rights have reported that the new regulations implemented last October imposed even stricter limits on family and humanitarian visits. Lawyers initially prohibited from visiting prisons now face restrictions preventing them from visiting children regularly. The International Committee of the Red Cross has said that its humanitarian visits to Palestinians were suspended. Israel will not release the numbers of the detainees in the military, and it's the only country in the world that automatically and systematically prosecutes children in military courts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Elizabeth Stitt.
(3113) Friendship Road, Elizabeth Ray Stitt. Good evening. So we start every meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, and the very last phrase is, "with liberty and justice for all." Tonight, you also honored American Indians and what they brought to our culture and our community and our land. But somehow, all of those words go out the window as soon as we get past that part of the meeting, because what you're doing to my property is not giving me liberty. I don't have the liberty to use it. You're going to change it dramatically, and it's not just. And if we have American Indians as a part of our culture and you truly want to honor them, those of us who have not developed our property and don't want to develop our property and want to continue to keep our trees as it is, we're honoring that spirit. There is another route for the Forest Main. It is on the other side of the highway. We actually had a yes to move it to the other side. But somehow when we got excluded from the conversations, that yes turned into yes with all of these extra conditions. I have tried to reach out to folks to say, hey, let's have a conversation. Let's really understand what's at risk. So I sit back and I listen to the Pledge of Allegiance and I'm like, do you as elected officials believe in it? And then you see the presentation of the American Indians. Are they just words? When did those words become action? I've been coming here for 2.5 years looking for action. I've lived here since 1991, and I have never seen our community hurt as much as it hurts now. You hear about all the developments and the loss of privacy, the loss of trees, wanting some common sense, and people give up, people move out, and guess what? It doesn't matter if you move out because you got a long list of people who want to move in. We're not important. I understand that. But I want to know, does the Pledge of Allegiance mean anything? Is this American Indian Month, does it mean anything? Does it mean anything when people come up and talk? because I've sat here for 2.5 years waiting to see. And I have seen a few things. I've seen the Okie tree saved. I've seen Sweetwater get their extra door to their dog park and lower their speed limit. I'm greatly appreciative that we're moving forward on the stoplight, but does it have to be this hard? I think that's what you hear. It's frustration as people have conversations. Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone for speaking tonight. That closes out our public forum. And we're moving now into public hearings. And we'll start with public hearing number 1, rezoning case 24 CZ 14, Broadstone PUD amendment, presented tonight by Joshua Killian.
Good evening, Council. Joshua Killian here to present rezoning case 24 CZ 14, Broadstone PUD amendment. This property under consideration for this rezoning is central to town, located just within the Apex Peakway along South Hugh Street. The area of this parcel is about 5.84 acres and is currently vacant with pockets of trees throughout the property. The property is currently zoned Plan Unit Development Conditional Zoning, and all of the land contiguous to this parcel are all a part of the same overall Broadstone Station or Broadstone PUD. To the north, across South Hugh Street, we have Cambridge Village. To the east, across Apex Peakway, is both the Murphy gas station and the Walmart. To the west is the Stone Glen Apartments, and to the south is a continuation of the Stone Glen Apartments property, along with Apex Peakway. The applicant is proposing to revise a few conditions from the current rezoning case 19CZ03, which currently allows this parcel to only be used for retail uses. The 2045 land use map identifies this subject property as mixed use, medium density residential, high density residential, office employment, commercial services. The proposed uses in this rezoning are consistent with that land use classification. The applicant conducted 2 neighborhood meetings, the first on June 27th and the second on September 19th, 2024, and those reports are in your agenda packet. This rezoning case was exempt from meeting with the Environmental Advisory Board per the UDO, since this rezoning does not propose any additional impacts to the environment or revisions to the buffers that were approved in rezoning case 19CZ03. So this slide here shows you the proposed uses that are currently being suggested for this parcel. In rezoning case 19CZ03, the uses were revised to only include those under the subheading retail sales and services within the use category of commercial uses. Because the primary intention of this rezoning is to allow the use hotel or motel, staff reviewed all of the non-residential uses from the previous rezoning case prior to that one of 10CZ10 to look at all of the non-residential uses that may help to provide a little bit more compatible uses with the hotel motel use for this property. And on this slide, we have the non-residential uses from the 10CZ10 rezoning that are being removed from the proposed use list of uses. So as you can see here, we have vehicle repair and service type uses, and a few of those retail sales and services and high traffic uses being removed from this parcel. There are a few added zoning conditions to this parcel. The first one is referencing the proposed location of the use restaurant drive-through, and this is only in relation to the use restaurant drive-through. So as you can see here, it says that it would be allowed in a multi-tenant building, but no closer than 200 feet to South Hugh Street, And then we have the standalone use of restaurant drive-through being restricted to 375 feet. And here you can kind of see a rough depiction of the yellow zone would be no drive-throughs at all. The blue would allow a multi-tenant building with an end unit being drive-through. And then the remainder of the parcel to the south would be allowed to have a restaurant drive-through standalone use. The next two zoning conditions are related to transportation. The driveway access is addressing that there was a proposed driveway access along the Apex Peakway here that is being removed from consideration. So all of the access will come through the existing Stone Glen apartment accesses, the first off of South Hughes Street, and the second would come off of Apex Peakway, and there's shared driveway agreements already approved for those. This is just locking it in as a zoning condition for this property. And the developer is agreeing to finish out the 10-foot side path along South Hughes Street, connecting from the frontage of Stone Glen Apartments and their frontage on Apex Peakway, along with a little bit of an extension or expansion of the right-of-way along South Hughes Street. Planning Board recommended approval of this rezoning unanimously, and planning staff recommends approval of rezoning case 24CZ14 with the conditions as offered by the applicant. Any questions for myself? And Matthew Carpenter is here for the applicant as well.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Ms. Killian? All right, hearing none. Mr. Carpenter, how are you tonight? Good.
Good evening, Matthew Carpenter with Parker Poe, 301 Fayetteville Street, here this evening on behalf of the developer and property owner. I've got with me tonight Pratik Patel with Angel Management, the developer, Jeff Roach with Peak Engineering, our civil engineer, and Morgan Rosamond with Kimley Horn, our transportation engineer. And appreciate the time tonight. This is a very narrow PUD amendment to allow the development of a hotel and associated retail uses along Apex Peakway. And as Joshua mentioned, this property and the surrounding properties are part of the Peakway at 55 PUD that's been in place for several years, almost a couple decades now. It was originally approved in 2007. Several areas of the PUD have been developed over the years. You can see the Walmart was part of the original PUD, and then the DHIC project. And the DHIC PUD amendment that was done in 2019 is part of the reason for this PUD amendment request. Before the DHIC project came through, the DHIC property just to the west of us, rather, on the left side of your screen here, was designated as hotel, retail, and office. And then, they came in for a PUD amendment in 2019 to move that designation to allow the affordable housing development, and they placed it on our property. But when they did, they removed the hotel office label so it would just say retail. So the current zoning today allows retail uses by right, but not necessarily a hotel. And so the purpose of the PUD amendment is to relabel the property as non-residential. And then as we've gone through the rezoning process, we've made several changes that I think improve the zoning over the current zoning, and we've worked through those with staff. The first is a prohibition on certain uses that really are no longer appropriate here that are permitted under the current zoning. Those are things like gas station, dry cleaners, uses that aren't appropriate here given the context and the proximity to other commercial uses and residential. The next, I think Joshua did a good job explaining this one, but this came, I believe, from a staff concern about sort of heavy vehicle uses at the intersection of the Peakway and South Hughes Street. The Chick-fil-A is under construction there, or shortly will be, and their approved site plan shows their drive-through aisle coming sort of right up against the Peakway. And so if there were a similar fast food restaurant to go on our property, there could be really heavy vehicular uses there right around the intersection, which is not all that functional and doesn't look good either. And so what we've done is limited where drive-through restaurants can go. You see, we broke it down based on a standalone drive-through and a multi-tenant building. The thought there was we wanted to leave the flexibility for an end-cap drive-through. Sometimes you'll see a Starbucks or a Dunkin' that's part of a big, larger multi-tenant building, and those are typically less intensive drive-throughs, but would be a nice amenity for the area. And then the other main change that we've made, and we just added this condition today and worked through with staff. Some of the feedback that we've gotten throughout the case was, we want a mix of uses here, not just the hotel, but also some retail. And really, that goes all the way back to the pre-app meeting that we had with staff, where they suggested some retail buildings. And so we've shown those in our sort of internal sketch plans throughout the case, but they hadn't really made it into the zoning in any significant way. And so we worked out a condition that will say that we'll set aside 10,000 square feet for those retail uses, as shown on the first site plan submittal that comes in. So, we can't obviously regulate the retail uses into existence. We've got to, the market has to respond, and we have to find tenants that fit. But we can reserve the land so that, you have some confidence that, the entire property won't be developed for a hotel. It'll be a hotel and those supporting retail uses.
Matthew, can you read the language?
Sure.
Exactly?
Yep. It says a minimum of 10,000 square feet of land shall be reserved for food and beverage service, office and research, and retail sales and service uses, and identified on the first site plan application for the property. And so those use categories are essentially all the use categories under commercial other than hotel. And so the idea is that land will be set aside. Our initial plans showed more than that, but that's what we put into the condition just to give us some site planning flexibility.
Thank you.
Yep. And so with those changes and the proposed uses, we think it's a much improved zoning designation over what's currently permitted. It's squarely consistent with the land use map designation, which calls for commercial and retail uses here in that mixed use center along Highway 55. For those reasons, we respectfully ask for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Carpenter?
I do have a question. So in your remarks, Mr. Carpenter, you mentioned that you want to remove the term residential from the zoning altogether, make the entire land non-residential. Why limit yourself? Why not allow for a future, apartment building or mixed use, retail bottom floor, apartments on top, something along those lines? Kind of going back to your other comment that you made around like the market needs to bear or needs to ask for this retail space, right? So why remove residential from this property?
Yeah, I may have misspoke, but there are no residential uses permitted on this property now, only retail. And so we're going from retail to a broader array of commercial uses. So if we wanted to do residential, we'd have to come forward with a rezoning.
Which is what you're doing. So,
but we're not asking for residential, and as we went through staff review, there was really no, based on the land use map, there was no support for residential uses here, because I think that this broader area in the original PUD was shown as commercial, and then I think Kite Realty, who was the overall developer, saw over the years that it was difficult to develop it all for commercial, and so then pieces have come in with residential. Like the DHIC property, which obviously, is a great use. It's great that they've developed that there, but it did take up land that was at one time designated as commercial. So this is one of the last left commercial pieces, and so what we've heard from staff is that we want it to remain commercial. So
okay, can I get staff's opinion on that, please?
Yes, the Broadstone PUD overall already includes Cambridge Village, the apartments beside of Walmart, and Stone Glen. And so Matthew is correct, staff wanted to ensure that there would be retail or non-residential opportunities on this corner to both serve the residential in the area and provide jobs for people who live nearby.
And so why remove like an option like, you know, bottom floor retail with residential on top? Because that serves both the retail purpose, but also gives us a little bit of flexibility to look at, you know, potential extension of the Stonewall Glen neighborhood, for example, or, you know, any other type of, you know, higher density housing development.
So the issue is that was not within their request, and they would literally have to start from day one with a neighborhood meeting if they're going to add that use. They cannot add it at this point without starting completely over. And in looking at the overall project, we've had people want to put residential on this property for many years, and we've been holding out for non-residential because there is already 2 apartment complexes within the Broadstone PUD.
Okay.
So maybe I'll chime in. I was there for the original 2019. I think Audra was too. And my experience in this time, even before that, was if we can convert everything to residential, and it would turn to residential immediately in Apex, and we'd be 95% residential, 5% everything else. So I think I appreciate the staff holding the line and saying areas where we think it should be commercial or non-residential to preserve those, because otherwise it'll be gone. In this case, I recall, you know, because it was a income limited project, we decided to make an exception on that. But I don't think if it had been just regular apartments, I would have voted for a conversion from office and commercial to residential. So I thought, you know, and then preserving that little part on the corner there, which is, you know, the busiest part, is probably the least desirable for residential anyway, and the most desirable for commercial uses.
I mean,
so I thought it was appropriate.
There's precedent. If you look, you know, there's developments in Cary with, you know, downstairs retail, like, and upstairs residential along main thoroughfares, and so I don't think that this is any different. Now, 5-6 years ago, when this rezoning was done, we may not have thought about those options, but we are 5-6 years older and wiser now. So I'm just wondering if we want to reintroduce residential into this development or into this zoning to allow for that type of development going forward, right? It still meets the residential or the retail spirit, in addition to the hotel that is being specifically considered here. But I think it allows us more flexibility.
So I would like to note that, excuse me, as part of the overall Broadstone PUD, there is still one remaining tract of land, which if you look at this property here, it's this property that could still come in as residential. So I think the focus is activating this, allowing the person who's looking to develop what they're trying to on this property, but understanding that we do still have availability within the overall Broadstone PUD to do additional residential if we have someone who's looking to do that in this area.
And we've encouraged the mixed use, vertical mixed use in other developments. The one across from Town Hall is an example where I wasn't going to vote for it unless they had that. It's not gotten built yet, but across the street. And also the Depot 499 one has a section set aside for that very reason. I thought that was a nice feature of those developments.
So why limit ourselves on this one?
That's not what's been proposed, as you said, and it's not the most urban feel here that maybe other places the market would suggest that, but I don't know why they didn't propose it.
It would appear that, and this is just my examination of kind of like the old record and a bunch of things, but it would appear that the intent then, by not placing residential, was this is an area that we wanted to encourage non-residential. If this were residential, given the opportunity to be residential, I think the expectation, or at least the assumption would be that we'd see a bunch of houses being placed in there. That would be the default. It appears that had the DHIC project not been an affordable home project, right, that project wouldn't be there. There were a lot of overriding factors that make DHIC and the project there enough to kind of say, all right, we're going to override the overall desire to make this as commercially viable as possible. And I completely understand and recognize the point that my colleague is making with regard to, are you limiting options? But I think in this case, that was the purpose.
Right.
To limit the options, to restrict residential and make sure that that wasn't a component. And whether that's due to traffic or other factors that were there, I'm not going to go back and try to read the mind of council's past, but it seems clear that the intent was not to make as much of this location residential from the beginning, but for the fact that there's a strong desire, need, and quite frankly, a purpose behind affordable housing, and the right mix of things at the time, hard work by a lot of folks to make that happen. It didn't appear to me that even if DHIC had not been an affordable housing project, that would have been sufficient enough to make it there. And I defer to my colleagues who were present at the time if I'm misspeaking. But that seems to be the way that it reads to me.
I think it's what we have in front of us right now.
Yeah.
And that's where we are.
Yeah, and you're right, Councilmember Gray. That was our intent. And I watched the DHIC hearing the other day just to refresh what went on there. And I think they said that this site, the DHIC site, was the only land in Apex that met the criteria for LIHTC tax credits. And so that made it very unique. And sort of the prevailing policy guidance that we've gotten recently from staff and from the town and from you all in your comments at these hearings has been that where there's commercial area on the land use map in town, we want it to stay commercial. And so I probably would have told the developer if they brought this project at the beginning and they asked for apartments that it didn't have legs, because it's a very commercial designated area on the land use map. I know there's some residential striping, but that's been sort of the policy guidance that we've been under, and how we've approached the case was, we're going to follow the original intent of the PUD and make as narrow of a change as we can to allow the hotel use.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Thank you. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Carpenter? Okay.
Yeah, I had one more, or one. Well, I guess two things. One is, just for full disclosure, I've been asking about a bus stop as part of this rezoning because of the residents that are going to live in that apartment nearby, and the fact that there's a bus stop up near Cambridge Village and there's one down the road, but there's not one over here, and I thought it would be a great spot. And the staff has talked about the crossings being unsafe for pedestrians and the slope and the curve. It's just not the best spot for a crossing without some kind of signalized crossing. So can you speak to your interaction with the staff and with
yeah. So we briefly explored the idea just in a couple of days, but as Councilmember Gant mentioned, what we were looking into was a potential bus stop at Emerald Pines and Apex Peakway. And so, I reached out to transit planning staff, and just asked about how that would fit into the overall transit plans. And their response was that, it's not a bad location, but it is difficult because of the mid-block crossing, the curve in the Peakway, and then there are bus stops on South Hughes Street near the intersection. And so, it seemed to me, not to speak for staff, they can respond too, but that their preference would be to funnel pedestrians to the intersection there if we couldn't get a pedestrian crossing at Emerald Pines. And so, that wasn't part of our TIA. It wasn't in any of the staff comments when we went through review. And so it's difficult to commit to that without, further due diligence on exactly where the crossing would be. I think there'd be discussions we'd have to have with NCDOT and transit staff again. And so, we're happy to continue through site plan review, talking with staff about that, where a potential stop could go on the Peakway. But we can't add it as a condition because we haven't done the due diligence on it. So,
and my suggestion just for you guys' knowledge was trying to figure out a more limited condition where it's, let's say there is a traffic signal at Broadstone Way and and the other road there. That would make for a safer pedestrian crossing, and that would mean the bus stop might be more viable. And my hope is that at the very least, if it's not part of the zoning, that if there is a signalized cross intersection there at some point, which I think with the Peakway, once that opens up, it'll be a lot busier and probably we're more at that eventually. I hope we can make that happen, either site plan or the town afterwards. Because I think the residents there may use that Cambridge Village stop, especially when the sidewalk gets completed, which would be really great. But I think they'll be much more likely to use the stop nearby if they don't have to cross any roads. So that's what we've been discussing.
All right.
Hopefully have a condition, but I guess I understand the due diligence thing.
Thank you, Councilman. All right, we'll move on now to open up public hearing for comment. We have Phil Welch speaking first.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Phil Welch. I live at 1471 Big Leaf Loop in Apex. A thought occurred to me as I was looking over the staff report this morning. I noticed that this parcel, and by the way, there was no coordination with any council members on this. This is just my own thinking. I noticed that the parcel and the surrounding area were rezoned in March of 2007 and designated as residential at that time. More recently, the parcel was reserved for retail development, while the adjacent parent parcel, and I think that was the Stone Glen, now developed as a family affordable apartments called Stone Glen. As an aside, I visited Stone Glen, and I was really impressed with the quality of the construction and the amenities that are there. I toured a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment there. They're really nice, and there's still some available. So if you know people that are looking, direct them over there. The question that occurred to me was whether a mixed-use zoning for the parcel we're talking about tonight was ever considered. And I know a hotel is being proposed for the site, so I'm not sure how much of the parcel would be available for other retail uses. My thought was whether the other retail establishments might include upper floors of apartments or condos. Again, this was not at all coordinated. This is just, what I was considering. In my vision, those residences could be a mix of market rate homes and affordable homes. That would be consistent with the 2045 land use map. It would also be reflective of the market rate homes across the Peakway in Broadstone Village and the affordable homes in the adjacent Stone Glen. Maybe this possibility has already been considered and found inappropriate for very good reasons. If so, I'd like to understand those reasons. My point is that I think the town of Apex needs to be a bit more creative and aggressive in filling our gap in affordable homes, especially for our essential workers, especially if we're to have a chance of realizing our collective vision to meet the needs of people of all incomes, ages, and abilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. All right, Mr. Welch is the only speaker for this case, so I'll close public hearing for comment. And we'll go back to discussion of the item.
I do remember that in our discussion back when this was rezoned, basically what we said was anything that's labeled as a possibility of residential is going to be snapped up as residential. So we were trying to take that off the list of things here to make sure that commercial was actually done in this area, commercial, retail, office, all the above. So, I appreciate staff holding the line on that in these areas because we do have limited areas for commercial to go. Many people want to do residential everywhere, and affordable housing is on my mind, Phil, right? I love the idea of mixed use. I just don't know that this is the right spot for it. So I do think there are good places for that to go, and closer to downtown would definitely be a wonderful place because you have a lot of places for people to walk to. This area to me is a lot more vehicular in nature, so it's a little bit harder to have that same level of pedestrian ability. I do think if we put a stoplight there like you were talking about and have it signalized, then that might change the possibility of what it looks like there. But that is definitely not what we have in front of us today. So I'm in favor of this.
Okay. I'm not going to stand in the way on this one. I'm supportive of the hotel use like that. You know, we definitely desperately need hotel capacity in Apex. This area makes sense. It's highly retail oriented, kind of the four corners, or commercial oriented in this section, so it makes sense. The only thing I would like to say to the property owner, is that if future considerations would potentially consider mixed use, please come see us again for another rezoning at that point, because I do believe that we can meet the spirit of both the retail non-residential uses as well as what Mr. Wells just outlined. Get a little bit creative here and address some of our housing inventory.
Thanks, Councilman. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I would add, the reason that we got here and we're having this conversation is because I think at one point or another, all of us, all six of us, have expressed and made comments about the mix of residential to commercial, the tax base in Apex, and how it's advantageous to our citizens to have a more commercial tax base like Cary, and puts less of the tax burden on our residents, so on. So we've historically been protective of our commercial uses for that reason. And after the recent revaluation, I believe we went from 80-20 to 82-18, I think is a mix now. So because the reval and residential properties are going up in value so much, we're actually moving backwards on there. So for that reason, we do want to see more commercial where we can. I think to your point and to the speaker's point, I mean, you're right, like we do need to be creative. But to what the mayor said earlier, keep in mind that we have what we have in front of us today. Procedurally, we can't add a residential use. We heard our staff say that, because that would restart the process. They would have to have another neighborhood meeting. They would have to basically start over. Like it's yes or no on this is what we have today. We can add minor stuff or try to get minor stuff, but at the end of the day, it's going to be fundamentally the same. I like this rezoning because I do want to make, looking at the map today, between Stone Glen and Cambridge Village, the major employer there is Walmart, right? And I imagine, I don't know who's working where, but I imagine a significant amount of those residents are working at Walmart, and they're crossing this busy road, and that's not great. So it's nice to have a hotel and other uses to provide other employment opportunities on this side of the road for the residents who are there. It builds a more complete neighborhood for them. So for that reason, I'm supportive of it. And to your point, council member, regarding talking to us, like we have a procedural way for us to make that policy statement. It's our land use map. So if we wanted to update the land use map to say, hey, we want to have high density apartments here possibly, we can make that policy change without them doing a rezoning, and that would be our official signal to people. Hey, if you want to build affordable units here, mixed use, whatever you want to do, that would be the way to do that. We can make that formal statement. I think that's something we could pursue, but I'm in favor of the rezoning as it is today, because I think it'll enrich the neighborhood, provide employment opportunities, and it'll help grow our commercial tax base.
Just to comment on your last statement there, yes, we can update the land use map. Land use map as it stands does call for residential, right? That's not what the zoning on this particular property says, but the land use map has the zoning stripes in there. I don't want, as a matter of practice in general, don't want to single out a single property to make land use map changes. So even though that's within our purview, I think that's bad practice. So I would not be supportive of an act, unilaterally on our part to do that. And therefore, I think, I want to kind of put the offer out to the applicant today, if this evolves and this use that we've been discussing becomes a future interest, to come back for that rezoning request.
That's a good point.
All right. Is there a motion?
Motion approved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any other discussions?
And to clarify, that's the additional condition that was read today at the meeting about the retail? Okay.
Yes.
So you are looking to approve the additional condition
As offered by the applicant.
as offered by the applicant?
yes.
Okay.
All right, have a motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. All right. All right, public hearing 2, Wake County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan. Resolution. Ms. Shelley Mayo.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
As the mayor said, the next item in front of you is the most recent Wake County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Update Plan. It's will last from 2025 to 2030. And if you'd like tongue twisters, try saying that 5 times fast. Just to give you a little background, because hazard mitigation isn't something that everybody thinks about every day, even less so than normal land use planning. Hazard mitigation is a planning process that we use to identify risks and vulnerabilities that are associated with natural and man-made disasters, and to develop long-term strategies to try to do our best to protect people and our property in town from those potential hazard events. There are 5 important federal acts listed on the slides in front of you. I'm not going to go through them. Just know that this is the enabling legislation on the federal level that requires us to do this kind of planning in order to get access to FEMA grant money. In order to actually qualify for any of that, we have to go through this process every so often. And then the hazards that are included in the Wake County plan are listed on this slide and the next one. We figured that pictures might make it a little easier to understand what we're thinking of. This is not all of the hazards that are out there. These are the ones that we, both with our consultant and with the variety of experts at the county level and with the different jurisdictions, have decided are the most likely to happen in our area. So one great example is I'm from the mountains. We have limestone caves everywhere. Sinkholes are a thing all the time. I can't tell you the number of times that I have turned on the news in the morning and found out that the highway had a giant hole in it on my way to class. And that's just not something we have to worry about here. There's no limestone caves underneath of our roads or our soils, so we don't include it in our hazard mitigation plan. So just one example of one of the things that we don't have to worry about here. On this slide, you'll see extreme heat outlined in red. When we went through and did our risk analysis for the various hazards and looked at all of the different data associated with them that our consultant pulled for us, we identified 3 that were the riskiest for us. High heat is one of them. I know you guys felt that heat this summer and the summer before and probably every summer that you've lived here. High heat, and this isn't something that I knew until this year, kills more people every single year than any other hazard in the country. And it causes more emergency room visits and more health issues, but it especially kills more people, and that's including hurricanes and tornadoes. And it's not something we think about very often, and it's because people forget just how dangerous heat is, especially when the heat index and the humidity rise in the south. So just a little plug on that one. The other 2 most risky items or most risky hazards are thunderstorm winds for our area and then severe winter storms. We don't get severe winter storms every single year, but because we live in the South and we don't get them every single year, they're actually more dangerous for us than they are, say, in Pennsylvania or Michigan or New Hampshire. My family's from New Hampshire, and no thank you. There are also 3 new ones that you'll see on this list at the very bottom of the slide. These are ones that were not included with the plan 5 years ago. That plan only included natural hazards. We have new information from FEMA and new directions that include man-made ones. So those are radiological emergency because of Sharon Harris, cyber threats, and which we just went through, and terrorism events. None of these were identified as being anywhere close to our highest risk hazards, but they are in there, and we do have sections for them, and we do have policies implementing for them. So federal law requires that we adopt and reevaluate our hazard mitigation plan every 5 years. In 2014, Wake County and the municipalities pooled their resources and came together to develop our first multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan. Previously, the county and all of the jurisdictions had to do their own individual one. And we have done ours since we were first required to by federal law. In December 2019 was the last time I came before you for a full hazard mitigation plan adoption. We normally do a yearly update after that. And that one was adopted in December of that year. This year in January, we started working with a consultant and the other Wake County municipalities and the state on the next one. That will go into effect in January 2025. And actually, if I'm remembering correctly, either yesterday or last week, Wake County adopted this plan already. So they were the first, and we're going to be number 2. This plan will actually, the plan that we currently have will actually expire January 2025, which is why it's important to get this one adopted before then, so that we don't have any unfortunate gaps in our ability to qualify for FEMA funds. This is definitely not a single person or single department's responsibility. This isn't anything that any one person can lay claim to or could possibly do. Instead, we have a committee that gets together every year to update, and then that gets together every 5 years to really review everything. And each department provides at least one member, if not multiple. And the names on this list are all the people in Apex who helped out with this on the staff side. So I just want to give kudos to everybody who worked on this. They did a great job, and they were always really helpful.
I was going to say, Matt Hunter, he probably loved the promotion, but I think he's a senior police officer. Senior captain.
Yeah.
See that? Yeah.
I probably put his title in there wrong, and I apologize for that, but I'm sure Mr. Hunter would be thrilled. Before I move on to the next slide, the citizens and businesses of Apex are really the ultimate beneficiaries of this. This plan is to make sure that they're taken care of. It's trying to reduce the risk for the people who live, work, and visit Apex, and provide a framework for the foreseeable hazards that can impact the town. The plan is trying to reduce those instances where the worlds of violent natural occurrence and human environment intersect. And by reducing the risk of personal property or personal injury and property damage, we can reduce the impacts of that disaster. The committee met in February of this year and went through several items, but most especially our action plan, which is really kind of the core of the hazard mitigation plan. It's the list of things that the town is working on to actually combat or mitigate individual hazards. And I'm going to go through the items that were marked as completed, and then I'm going to list the ones that are marked as new, and then I've got a second section to go over real quick. But just to give you some quick uplift, we finished Public Safety Station number 6. That's the one on Wimberley Road. Fire department created a situational awareness dashboard in the Emergency Ops Center that allows them to keep an eye on all the different hazards going on in the town and the different degrees to which they need to be addressed. Planning department updated the UDO and the Design and Development Manual to incorporate proper species selection and practices for planting and maintenance in our ordinance. We also incorporated separation standards between daycares and hazardous uses, and then additional separation standards adjacent to gas and fuel wholesale. And then Water Resources implemented the stormwater utility fee and program, which took a ton of work and is going to have really big, important stuff along with it. The new stuff that we're talking about right now is the electric Utilities Department will be upgrading the East William Street substation to add 2 very large transformers out there. And then constructing new feeder lines in strategic locations to tie the substations together so that if lines go down in one area of town, we can more rapidly and appropriately reroute power to those areas. The fire department is working on plans to renovate the station on Hunter Street and constructing public safety station number 8. IT is working with fire and police on a camera project in downtown and here on campus that'll let us keep track of people better during day-to-day business, but also especially during the festivals that we like to hold. And, you know, when we have several thousand people downtown, it can be a little tricky to keep an eye on everybody and make sure that nobody's getting hurt in ways they shouldn't. Strike that last part, that nobody's getting hurt. The Parks Department has been working on several new greenway plans. They've got plans to add the Big Branch Greenway, as well as a new section for the Reedy Branch Greenway from Abington to Goliath Lane, and the Middle Creek Greenway running from Gladstone North to Center Street. The Police Department is also planning to increase the size and renovate part of the Police Department building, adding additional office spaces as we expand. Transportation and Infrastructure Development is working on a GPS emergency vehicle preemption. Basically, this allows emergency vehicles to take control of the red lights and the green lights at different intersections to allow them to get through those lights a little bit faster and make sure that they can get those response times down. The Justice Heights Street extension is, last time I looked, it's in CDs right now. We're almost ready to sign them, and they should be getting started within the next few months. Apex Peakway North widening from Center Street to Old Raleigh Road is coming up. We're working on plans for that. It's from a 2 to a 4-lane road expansion, and there's plans for a connector piece from Pristine Water Drive to Lufkin Road. What's currently out there now is a glorified large gravel drive, well, paved driveway. So this will actually make it capable of handling larger traffic. And then Water Resources is working on condition assessments for both our sanitary sewer and our stormwater systems, and building the new water tower out at Pleasant Park. Okay, the other big thing that happened this year was moving things over to a capability assessment. We did create one of those 5 years ago, but FEMA issued new guidance 2 years ago saying that as municipalities basically implement programs and gain capabilities, the items that were previously listed as ongoing in the action plan, things like making sure houses aren't allowed to build in the floodplain, making sure that riparian buffers are kept outside of individual lots, things like that. Those are no longer considered action items. Those have now been moved to the capability assessment. And they just gave us this language, which I thought was really good. And I'm just gonna read it real briefly. Just says, keep in mind how capabilities and mitigation actions differ. Once implemented, mitigation actions become a capability. Participants should create mitigation actions that build on and improve their capabilities. These actions should increase existing capability or add new ones. Existing routine capabilities that we're already doing are not mitigation actions. This includes ongoing maintenance programs that are already started and on schedule, and other items as well. I've given you a selection of the items that were taken out of the action plan and moved into the capability assessment here. This is not all of them. Excuse me, the full list of those is on page 4 of your staff report, but this is just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. Keeping the town website updated with information about Sharon Harris siren training, keeping the trees trimmed along the electric rights-of-ways, salting and brining the local roads before snow and ice fall, and during development review, ensuring new development complies with our floodplain restrictions. That is all I have to present to you tonight. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them for you. Planning Board did hear this at their meeting last week, and they recommended approval unanimously, and of course, planning staff recommends approval as well.
Thank you so much for your work on this, Shirley. So much, everyone involved.
I have a quick question. So we were talking a little bit earlier about a landslide. Do you foresee this being a part of this at some point?
The landslide that we talked about was a very localized item and was in an area of town that it was a single lot, a large lot, but a single lot where the owners had cleared all of their trees off the property, and it was right next to to the American Tobacco Trail, where we have historically super steep slopes because of the way the railroad was built. I really don't think so. It was definitely something that was unexpected. Because we don't have that much land in town that meets all of those criteria, and we have a requirement or actually a prohibition on slopes that are steeper than 2 to 1 in town without a retaining wall, I'd find it very unlikely. Now, it's possible that after we get all the data in from the last set of storms that will happen, that maybe there's more of that happened across Wake County, but I would be surprised.
Okay. Because I know you said these are like the most common things that happen in general, but I know it is also a big job to clean up those types of things when they happen. So.
It is. Yeah, I would be surprised. If for no other reason than landslides tend to happen in places that are both steep and poorly vegetated. And we don't generally have a lot of both of those things occurring at the same time in Wake County, but it's definitely something that I'll keep an eye on next year when we start looking at the data again.
Ms. Mayo, I had a quick question about this plan in regards to private property. Mm-hmm. It's like, I know from the hurricanes in Western North Carolina, we initially heard a lot about the flooding, but as time went on, I think it became more about the trees that had fallen and the problems that had caused. And so what role, if any, does this kind of planning effort have for trying to inform our residents of things they can do to try to prevent that kind of thing from happening on their property or onto their house or vehicles in the event that we had a similar type of hurricane?
That's a great question. Right now, the plan is live on Wake County's website. We'll have a link to it on ours after it's adopted, assuming, of course, that you all adopt. And after that point, there's also a variety of guides on FEMA's website, the state's website, and we can easily link some of those to our own website as well. And then, of course, staff is always happy to help and answer any questions that people might have. We also regularly speak with residents who are trying to pull permits for one thing or another and work with them just based off of what we see and what our experience is. Even without large hurricane level flooding, we still regularly have conversations with them about their trees and what's happening with them. We can definitely look further into making some more materials available online and possibly even getting the word out a little bit more on social media before and afterwards. But at the moment, that's all I have off the top of my head for you. I can promise to think about it some more, and if you have any suggestions, I'm happy to.
Well, quick follow-up. The part you mentioned about, I guess it was about capabilities, where it was talking about the trimming of trees along near the power lines. Is information that's included in the plan for that item, is that good information to have for residents when they're thinking about their own properties, or is it that more intense of a need to kind of back away from the power lines versus a house or a car?
It's primarily about the power lines. It's about making sure that we don't have a situation where a branch can fall in a regular storm and knock out power for an entire quarter of the town, for just to make up a number off the top of my head. But it's also to make sure that large portions of the tree don't come down on top of the electric lines. Your question about impacts to town, to the houses, is a good one. Older existing trees that are very close to a house are generally going to have more risk involved in high winds or heavy rain situations. One of the biggest problems with the hurricane that hit was actually that there was a ton of rain that hit before the hurricane actually hit the mountains. We had a whole bunch of that too. And then on top of that, it hit with hurricane force winds. So the soil was completely inundated. There's nothing dry. There were no pores of air to hold on to. So when the winds hit, the roots essentially slipped out of the soil really easily. And that knocked over, especially our shallow rooted trees like our large oaks and things. So it's actually a combination of things that happened, which is even rarer than just the hurricane itself. We don't actually allow trees on new developments to be planted closer than 20 feet, large trees closer than, I think it's 20 feet to commercial building and 10 feet for small. It might be 20 and 40. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but we have standards for how far away from buildings, both residences and commercial buildings, that they have to be, that we actually look at pretty closely during site plan review. As far as individual property owners, they would have to come talk to the town about that.
Okay.
But we can try to make that more easily available to them.
Yeah, just lastly, I think there'd be some value in some of these things that we're doing for the town related to infrastructure, to talk about what people should look for, like what types of tree, what size of tree, how close to the house, as an example of things that we're doing for ourselves in this plan, and therefore you guys may want to consider doing that for your house, or have somebody look into it at least.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
I was going to ask, I think the obvious question, we just had a devastating hurricane hit Western North Carolina a few weeks ago, and clearly, hearing your presentation, the work began in January. I'm assuming it was largely completed at that time. I just want to ask, has that disaster changed the thinking among staff and other people in the team that put together this plans? Do we anticipate that might come back next year with additional mitigations needed, or is it happen too late for the cycle? Because I think the timing here may confuse some people and think this may be a response to the hurricane, but this clearly was something we put into place long before.
That last point's a great one in particular. This is something we've been working on for a long time before that even happened. We do a yearly update. So staff and we're encouraged to do that by both the state and FEMA. So staff sits down, that whole big long list of people, and we have a conversation about what's needed every year. And we do that meeting once or twice a year. Sometimes we only need to do it once. Sometimes we need to do it, have a couple of individual meetings afterwards. But we can also update that as the year goes through and start to work on new initiatives as we realize that we need them. So this isn't a one and done. This isn't we're done for another 5 years. As we become aware of things that the town needs to look at, we can definitely add those to our list of items.
Yeah, I think what struck me about the hurricane and its response is how the response to it was statewide and immediate, right? And the capabilities that we have logged here, I mean, they speak to risks that are localized, but I think I've anticipated in the future, any future disaster, we'll see the same level of statewide response. So I'm curious to see, and this is kind of a rhetorical question, if in the future the planning looks more towards ways to build capabilities across the state, even if we don't need that extra capacity here. The reality is, if a disaster hits on the coast or in the mountains, we're going to send fire trucks or police officers, whatever capabilities, water rescue, whatever we can do.
So we do send electric linemen to pretty much every disaster you can think of, all up and down the East Coast. We have great guys who go out and get sent out for weeks at a time sometimes. I've also been told that we have firefighters and police officers who go and volunteer their time on a regular basis as well. The state actually takes care of the statewide response and capability assessment, and we do work with them pretty closely when we're going through this process. And we listen to what they have to say. If they tell us, you guys need to work on this because we're starting to see more of this in your area, or we need more of this on the state level, then we'll happily do that. So we have
for that. You're saying there's a state document.
Right, there's a state document, and then there's local municipal documents. We happen to have a county-wide one that we all work on. But there's a section for each municipality within the county in this as well. That's why it makes up about 550 pages.
I do have one observation and question. Observation, like a lot of the actions that you listed, we recognize from our capital plan, which is kind of a reflection of as we grow as a community, right? The infrastructure that we're building out, is built out with resiliency in mind, right? Whether that's electric capabilities, additional substations, additional water tanks for water supply and so forth. So there's a very nice intersect there of, what we do kind of because the town needs it, given the size that we are, right? And being prepared for, natural disaster or any other type of hazard. The one, my question, like in the list was also a series of greenways that were listed. And so how does greenway construction help in hazard mitigation? That one is a little bit nebulous to me.
It's a really good question. And what you have to think about is that the scope of a natural hazard or a man-made hazard can be very large and community-wide, but it can also be very small. I'm sure most of you have heard of the EQ disaster, even if you weren't here at the time that it happened. My understanding is they only had to evacuate a couple of miles of people within a couple mile radius of it, which is, when you think about it, a pretty small disaster. Not saying it didn't have a lot of impacts. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. I'm saying area-wise, it's fairly small and contained. A greenway is a great way to provide an alternate mode of transport, especially during a time when you have a ton of people hitting the roads. If you have a friend who lives 1.5 miles down the greenway and you're either a young child, or even if you're an adult with family or an older person, and you can get that distance, you can stay off the road and avoid a potential traffic accident, stay out of the way of emergency responders, etc. Also, our greenways are built to, I think, an 8-foot wide standard, which is wide enough for our emergency vehicles to get down. So if if they're cut off at one of the major intersections, or just cut off in general using the roads, they can use the greenways in a lot of instances to get back and around things. So that's part of the reason why we put those on our hazard mitigation plan. We need to think at a variety of different levels when we're working on this.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One quick question, we'll move on. The electric utilities and the power stations, I know a couple of years ago we observed some acts of terrorism, in regard to that. So is that part of this mitigation plan as well, as far as security enhancements to those areas?
I'm honestly not certain about that. I did have a great conversation with the director and with a couple of his staff members as well. I think that they did take some action after that, but I don't know the specifics of that, and there's probably a good reason for that. Nobody wants me knowing the specifics of our terrorism.
Just want to make sure it's a focus.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? All right, thank you so much for your work on it.
You're very welcome.
All right, we'll go ahead and open it up for public hearing for comment. And first speaker is Dawn Cozzolino.
Good evening again. I wanted to comment too. I heard about the man-made disasters as well as the natural ones, but What I didn't hear a lot of is transportation and accidents, and what I mean is also evacuation. So we live near a nuclear plant, and we have, as I was showing you, these monitoring stations throughout our area, and we're in Western Wake, right? So it's more rural. But these numbers are very high. If we were to evacuate, I know it's going to be elaborated on, but it takes 5 hours to get out. Okay, that's with like old data probably. So I want to share a story that I witnessed, and this was a couple weeks ago in my area. I don't know if you're familiar with the Dixie Pipeline. It's 1,100 miles. It's long. Tractor trailer got lost, thought it was a good idea, couldn't turn around to back up, decided to go on a property owner's lawn. Happened that they had the gate down, they were mowing, they had contractors mow the pipeline. The tractor trailer almost drove over the pipeline. Now, if that had happened, I have an emergency number now for my community so we can reach out if there's any questions. But that just happened during the day. Even the property owner wasn't home to understand what happened. So I got that communication out, but I got that number and it's on my cell phone actually. And the reason I bring it up is because these wacky things happen. These wonky things happen all the time. And if that had happened, he told me, he goes, well, you're going to see a plume of black smoke. And so what's going to happen, you can imagine, somebody sees that, they're going to hit the road. And then we're going to run into all this on 40,000, 55,000, 19,000. We're going to be stuck in our car and not able to escape. So I want you to take my feedback, not only about this particular hazard plan and mitigation, but just practical everyday things happen. And I really hope that you look at the subdivision roads report on minimum standards. It does ask for a traffic impact study. That's on dangerous roads, safe roads, and I will send that to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth Raystead.
So I don't know how much time you guys took and go through all the pages, but I'm a data geek and I went through every single page twice. And I gave these comments to Sharon Harris Nuclear Plant as well as Wake County. But if you look at the evacuation plan for Sharon Harris Nuclear Plant, I think that is our largest risk of a catastrophe. I mean, I think we deal with hurricanes and other natural causes. But if you look at it, the one thing that jumped out to me immediately was the schools are actually evacuated to different centers than what the homes are. And I don't know about you, but if my kid is in a school evacuating to a different place than where I'm supposed to go, I'm going to go get my kid. So, if you look at it, I know that people are like, oh, it's based on capacity, but the parents are going to follow the kids, or the parents are going to rush to the school. And if you look at the Apex Friendship schools, you have people rushing to an area that you can't get in and out of. So one of the suggestions I made to Wake County and to Sharon Harris as they reevaluate things this coming year is there a way to have some type of alignment between the homes of those students and those schools? The other thing that jumped out to me is in the case where we have roads that get blocked off for one reason or another, what is our helicopter capability? Because you may have to fly people in to be able to take people out. I don't think we have any of that capability locally. Then the other thing that I asked was actually for a new timed study on the evacuation route. The 5 hours that Dawn estimated is what the old study was, that to evacuate our part of Apex would take 5 hours. Can you imagine sitting in a car for 5 hours with nuclear fallout around you? You're not going to want to get in a car. You're going to want to shelter in place. So then that comes back to the iodine pills that Sharon Harris is supposed to give out. I have heard of some of the local daycares. They don't have the pills because Sharon Harris has run out of the pills. So some of these things that we know that we're going to need, that I think Apex could take leadership in because we are close to the plant, I would encourage you guys to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that closes public hearing for comment. Back to council for discussion or motion.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion Killingsworth.
Second.
Second Zigerman. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose. All right, motion carries unanimously. Thanks again, Shelley. Yeah, absolutely. All right, we move now to new business 1. Notes here. And one of the things I wanted to, I know this is like something that's been going on for quite some time. I think we're at draft 14 now, and we're ready to go ahead and close this thing out. I just had a couple of questions about, go to page 9, cultural advisory groups, and I just want a little bit more clarity on that. The first question is that just for town events or community events or both?
Town. So this is the, these policies are for town events. So yes, sir,
Okay.
that would be for town events.
All right, very well. The other thing we had our work session on this. I don't think we really cleared this part up. And one of the things we discussed, and I know, Mr. Bosberg, we had a conversation in my office about it. We were talking about taking some of the, I guess, management and I would say workload away from staff with regard to community members who are interested in serving on these advisory groups. So one of the things I would like to do for consistency is align this with what we normally do for our other boards and committees, and that it is a recommendation from the mayor and approved by council. That way there's consistency on it, and we're hearing directly from the community who wants to be on these boards.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
I view our boards and committees as advisories to council. That's the intent. That's how they're set up. And in that context, it makes sense for the current appointment process, with mayor recommendation, council confirmation. The committees that we're talking about here are not providing policy advice to council. They are planning committees for an event. I think that's a very different use case and doesn't warrant the same type of approval process. I want to encourage members in the community that have a passion for a cause or an event to be able to participate. But certainly for town-owned events, I think we need to trust our staff to, A, judge how much help they're going to need, and B, who the best people in the community are for them to work with. And I don't think that is up to us as a board to decide for them. So I wouldn't be in favor of setting up committees as if they were policy advisory committees to council.
Thanks for your feedback, and I want to remove a word you said out of it, trust. I trust the staff.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Bosberg, we had a conversation in my office and you commented about this. Can you share your information?
Yes, sir. So my comments are similar to what I spoke about at the work session. From a staff perspective, if you'll recall to the work session, we brought in a plan of how this process would look, and it started to kind of build and became a bureaucratic process, taking council feedback on that. So for us, we are happy to go down the path of making the selections. The only asterisk that I would put next to that is if it becomes a political process, then that's where I want to be protective of staff. And what I mean by that is there are going to be people that get onto the committees, there are going to be people that don't make it on the committees. And if that becomes an issue, I don't want staff to be kind of caught up in that. So we're happy to make those decisions. I don't want to say as long as it's a hands-off process, because I think that sounds bad. But if that's not going to be the case, then I think there does need to be more of a formalized process, and that's what we were presenting at the work session. But again, for us, we're happy to go the direction that's outlined here, as long as it's a, hey, staff, you're doing this, and I'm not going to get a call after our first committee and say, why didn't Bob or Joe or Samantha get on this committee? Because I think that's where it starts to be problematic.
Mayor, I'd like to add another point to this discussion, and is that I have been unhappy with the current committee selection process at times, and notably it's there have been situations where I have concerns about some of the folks who have applied to these committees, and I've expressed those concerns to you in the hopes that that wouldn't be a recommendation from you, because I'm going to oppose it no matter what. I'm kind of like, if I have a thought about it, I'm going to do it. But it's better not to do it in the meeting like this when there's a chance of embarrassing somebody. And so I thought, I was hopeful in some cases that the process of letting you know behind the scenes would have avoided that. It did not. And so an expansion of that to this purpose, I oppose.
Okay. The process of putting on an event is an operational thing. I don't want to get involved.
And I'd have to lean in that direction as well. And kind of let me give my perspective on why I think that's the case. I think there are committees that we have that are geared towards providing policy guidance to us. Planning board, adjustments. Those boards, even though they're called committees, those boards or committees, for lack of a better phrase, are there so that we can be provided guidance so that we can create the policy. I feel very strongly that there is a distinction between policy and operations. I feel like the manager is there for the operational aspect, and we're here as the policy side, and to help provide the guidance necessary so that the proper execution of the policy takes place. I feel like that's our role. When we start looking at committees, I feel like when we're looking at these committees that are providing policy guidance to us, I've said this before and I'll continue to say it, I think our charter is appropriate, and it says the mayor gets to make that selection of who's on there, and our job is to say yes or no to that person. There are a number, and we've all had this conversation on numerous occasions, and we all have agreements and disagreements as to interpretations of that and things of that. I'm just stating how I feel about this matter right now. With that said, I feel like when it comes to appointments for committees, that is something that the mayor should be the lead on when it comes to our policy issues. But as I said, I think there's a clear distinction between when we start getting in the operational context and for us. And I don't think when I'm looking at, say, when we're doing holy, I don't see that as a policy decision for us. I see the policy decision for us as, do we want that to be a town event, or is that something going to be led as a community-led event? I feel like that's where our decision was made at that point. But I would say that once we're looking at the issues of appointments for those committees, and I'm going to use lower C committees, I think that's something that is operational. I don't feel like that's something that we should get into the weeds on. It's necessarily going to be complicated and convoluted. I feel as if we need to stay on the policy side of things. And part of that policy would say, when you are looking at creating these sort of committees, these are the things that we would like to be able to see. I think that's a policy decision that is well within our purview to be able to make. But I think when we're talking about the issue of an event, I don't see that as a policy providing to us. I see that as a execution of the pre-existing policy, which is we're going to have these sort of events. And the thing that I see is, the reason why we have to have these conversations about, special event policies and things of that nature, and I've said this before, we're running out of real estate. And I don't mean in terms of just physical real estate. I mean, we're running out of real estate in terms of times on the calendar. And there are an ample number of events that we do, and more that we probably want to do, and some that we just can't do. And the tough part that we have is the reason why we're involved in this picture from the beginning is it's a resource issue. Someone's got to say, on behalf of the town, we think X number of police officers, X number of trash cans, X number of people to pick up trash, X number of utility resources, and so on and so forth are going to be allocated in order to have these sort of events. And to be clear, as a policy, we have said these sort of events are important because they are a reflection of our values as a community. That's what we have said when we have these sort of events. I don't think it's necessarily we're excluding a group because we didn't have that event, and I think that's part of the tension that we have when we start taking a look at the 52 weeks on the calendar and trying to figure out what events are going to take place on what event on what event day. Because I think what we're all really trying not to do is we don't want to make it look as if we've got the town saying we think this group is better than that group. And I think that's something that we're trying to kind of keep in mind. And I think that as a policy matter, that's something that we need to keep focused on. But when it comes to the execution, I think that that's an operational aspect that should go and is properly within the administration side of the house. But if we have concerns about how that is being done, that once again becomes a policy aspect for us. So I have no problem with, staff basically figuring out, picking who's on the committees. I think it's important that the staff picks people for the committee in ways that reflect what we would ultimately prescribe as guidance, which is be as open and inclusive as possible. Send out the net as wide as possible and allow as many people to be involved as possible. I don't know if there's necessarily an end number of people who should be on a committee. I don't know whether a 10, 15, 40, 140. I don't know if there's really a number for that. And guess what? I sit up here for a reason. You sit over there for a reason. You figure out how many people need to be there. I don't want to have to do that. That is not a decision that I feel is appropriate in terms of allocating the real issue of resources. Because if someone wants to volunteer their time and wants to say, I care enough about this town that I want to be involved in something, I'm certainly not going to get in the way of that. And I feel, and I may be overstepping, but I feel like the staff also feels in that way as well. I feel like this is going to be a developing target. We're not going to get it right the first time. Do I see us revisiting these issues in the future with regard to how we make these selections and what additional policy we need to provide? Absolutely. Are we trying to do the best we can to get it right? Absolutely. And I do think that that's the key of what, the reason why we have this conversation so frequently. I don't know if any other municipality has put in the number of conversations about the celebration of the freeing of African Americans after the Emancipation Proclamation. I don't know who else is doing that, but I'm damn glad that we are doing it. I do know for a fact that I get phone calls all the time, usually around the 1st of June, where someone's telling me that the town of Apex is celebrating a woke event for woke stuff and we're kowtowing to black people. And some people even have the courage to tell me this, that it's, inappropriate to reflect this on black people and not on others. I think that's a real bold statement to take with me. If you haven't noticed, and for the purposes of people who are on YouTube, I am black. But I think that's a bold statement to make. But I think it reflects the values that we're trying to pursue as a town. We want to recognize all of those members of our community, regardless of their place in life, regardless of their stance in life, regardless of their skin tone, their religion, their sexual orientation, their economic status, their ability to speak English or not. We want to be able to say to each and every person, you're welcome. Come join us. Let's share a little bit about each other. And that, to me, is what I see reflected within this policy. It's a great attempt to get there. And I think that it reflects and ultimately moves us in that direction. So I appreciate and appreciate the indulgence of my fellow members of the dais to allow me to kind of wax philosophic at this time. But I think it's incumbent to make sure that there's an understanding that we are talking about the special events policy, the program that's been put together, those 21 pages that we have as a policy document, and whether or not that's something that we want to continue to move forward on. That's my understanding of what consent item, or what was previously consent item 12 is. And I'm more than happy to be corrected along the way if that's the case.
I just feel like I was on a roller coaster.
Well, and I will say too that, there was a lot of words, right? A lot of stuff coming out of quite a lot of people here. So I'm not going to add to any of it. I will say the more that we get involved in any of the details, and I think if we got involved in this portion of it, the more political it would look. And I don't like that look for celebrating the people within the community. So I don't think we should go that route. So.
I just have one other question. What does rolling basis mean on that page? I just want that question answered.
So I'm going to invite staff up to look at that. I'm reading, these groups are open to the community at large and members are selected on a rolling basis. So I would think that would also mean we could have people rolling off in subsequent years. So you might be on the committee for 1 year, roll off the next year, roll new people on. That's how I would read it, but I'll ask those that wrote it.
Rolling basis would mean if we don't have a tenure for people serving on the committees. So rolling basis would be a continual thing. So if you want to continue to add 20 people to the committee, you potentially could have 20 people on the committee. But there's no tenure 2-year time frame for people to be removed from said committee. So,
and just to be clear, I appreciate all the comments made by my colleagues. You guys may think this is Mayor Jacques Gilbert trying to take power control over the process. That's not it. I'm a very engaged community member, a mayor, and I hear from many people in this community. So I'm being their voice, okay? So I'm just letting y'all know that. So it's not just me sitting up here trying to get my way. So I'm asking all of you to take the time and listen to the people of the community, because this is what they're telling me. Thank you, Mr. Sessa, for all you do.
Yeah,
all right, move on.
And I want to just kind of piggyback on that comment. I do think it's important to make it clear that this isn't hey, the mayor is trying to hide something or is trying to move something forward. I don't think that's the case at all. I think what we really are trying to make sure that we're clarifying is, and that's why I started off the conversation with, I feel like the mayor has a role in the appointment of people on our committees that, I don't want to say that the event committees don't matter, because they clearly do, but ones that provide the policy guidance to us. And making it clear for all who are within the room that that's still going to be my position. The mayor has a role with our policy-focused boards.
Motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, is town manager updates?
Yes, sir. I have a few items to mention. The first is, and it was brought up, we do have still a limited deployment in Western Carolina. with some of our employees. That team, it's come down significantly, but we do have some employees that are still deployed. So I want to keep them in our thoughts. I do want to mention too, we've had numerous examples coming back of residents there showing appreciation by putting notes on our employees, our Apex vehicles that were there. We had an email from PD that happened to them, an electric. So there's some great appreciation from the residents there for Team Apex being out there and being able to help. So I wanted to bring that up, and working with the mayor too. At some point, we're going to work to recognize those employees, bring them before council. So more to come on that, but great story there for Team Apex and what they're doing. The next item, we've had a lot of heavy topics. I've briefed you one-on-one on those, so I'm going to steer to a little bit lighter side and some of the items that I think make Apex what Apex is, and how we appreciate still that small town feel. There are some items that are coming up for the holidays through the Tour of Frights. I wanted to mention that item. That started October 12th through the 31st. It's every night from 6 to 9, and we've got about 30 houses that are participating in that, but they've gone out. There are maps available online. You can follow the maps. There are games that you can play with the kids as you go through different bingo things. A lot of work has been put into it, both from residents and from staff, and so that's something great for our community to enjoy. Next, I've got two more on that. It's Scarecrow Row, which happens October 24th through the 31st. That's at Apex Community Park. That park will be open till 10. It says bring a flashlight. You can see the scarecrows that are on display. Again, another fall great event for people to enjoy. And the last one I want to mention is the Goblins Groove Family Dance, which is on Saturday, October 26th from 5 to 7. That's at the Halley Cultural Arts Center, and there's more information as well about that. So a lot of good things going on in our community, a lot of work by our community members and staff members on those events, and wanted to mention it. The next thing I've got is also good news, and I believe it was mentioned by one of our speakers earlier too. Maybe not in the same regard, but the town, it's still not 100% official, but we've gotten the green light on our Vision Zero. I'll call it a certification. So Vision Zero certification, it'll be official on the map, we hope, in the next couple months. But to let you know the big deal, I mean, there are currently, when I looked at the map this morning to verify, there are only 2 other jurisdictions showing on that map in North Carolina that have this designation, and that's Durham and Charlotte. So Apex will be right there alongside Durham and Charlotte when it comes to our commitment to Vision Zero. And for those that don't know what Vision Zero is, it's a strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries while increasing safe, healthy, equitable mobility for all. So it's a commitment to eliminating traffic fatalities and severe injuries. So I can't tell you the lift that was there by the employees. I know many of you were involved as well. I know some of you may even want to comment on it. I've got a long list. There was a commitment from the council to have staff involved, transportation, planning, police, fire, communications, DEI, public works, all had employees that were on the committee to move this effort forward, and it's finally coming to fruition. So thank you to council and staff for making that happen. And that's all that I have.
Thank you.
One question. As I know, we've got a lot of crews that are up in the mountains, and we will recognize them. I think that's appropriate. Can we set aside, or at least make sure that we have a special recognition for the family members who are here? I know that, you know, for every person up there who's cutting down a tree, there's probably a kid who's got a soccer game whose mother or father isn't there to be able to get there. And a big part of when we send off forces in order to handle these sort of issues, we do a good job usually of recognizing those who are forces forward, but it's always important to remember those who are back home monitoring the homestead and recognizing the sacrifices that they're making on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. Great point. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Motion to go into closed session.
Make a motion.
All right, motion.
Second.
Second, Killingsworth. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. All right, we're moving to closed session. back. Meeting's adjourned. Thank y'all.